the one thing that we really love about our neighborhood is that it's a one-stop shop. There's so many, you can get everything you need in our district, and I think that's something that's important to be able to support local and to, support local artists, but support local entrepreneurs in your economy. So yeah.
By the way, she's on the BIA, so that's a salacious pitch just for coming to the neighborhood. But besides that, with Jesus, she's also done. One of the first things that we're going to do in today's episode is talk about why we started the Urban Art Collective from our own personal points of view, and sort of express ourselves from there. Lindsay, do you want to start?
Sure. So for us, I think as visual artists, starting out, we found that there was like a lack of support, and so we kind of struggled through like how do we become an entrepreneur, stuff like that. And I think that was something that if we had more support in the beginning, it could have taken away a lot of that kind of pain and suffering, if you want to call it. But we embraced entrepreneurship, and we actually really loved it, but not everybody does. And I think that's something that we need to look at and be like, well, why are we forcing this upon people? Why do artists have to become entrepreneurs? And I think that's where we kind of we're trying to remove the equation for artists by supporting them in different ways, and merchandising for them, creating space for them, removing barriers for them, that sort of thing. So I think that is where we kind of started, because we are strongly passionate about art. We love art. We love a certain type of art that's kind of unusual and kind of weird, and like we usually see that kind of stuff on the streets, but sometimes we see it in galleries. And for us, there's just like a ton of really talented artists in the city that have that kind of unique style that we feel is really underrepresented in the city, and something that we really want to see more of. So
cool.
Yeah.
And I think maybe we should also discuss before we complete the question is like, what is the Urban Art Collective? So I think a lot of people maybe will not know essentially who we are and what we do. Yeah. I mean, besides just the podcast. So like, I know for ourselves, we are a physical space. We are located in Hintonburg in Ottawa, and we have a gallery. We also have a space where we merchandise and sell artist work.
Yeah, so an art shop, yeah.
Yeah, an art shop. We also do, what else do we do?
We have a dry bar. So since we have a lot of events and stuff that happen in our space, because we really want to bring community together, we have a dry bar that sells really unique mocktails and coffee, and we have a magical wizard in behind that, which is fun. So that really helps to kind of elevate our space.
Yeah, our mixologist, the Bouge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we have like an event art space. We consider it to be sort of like an art hub, I suppose. It's the best way to describe it.
I always describe it as an art hub. But I think for us, it's a bit more than just an art hub. It's a place where, community and art meet. And that's kind of like our tagline for our events. And it really is true, because people that come there sometimes come for different events that are not art related, that are maybe focused on entrepreneurs and just bringing community together. And then they walk in this space and they're like, oh my gosh, like, what is this space? I've never seen this space. I always walk by this space, but I didn't know what it was. And it kind of helps people. It helps introduce people to art, maybe where they might think that like, oh, gallery spaces, I have to have money to buy art. People come in and they're like, how much is it? I'm like, it's free. It's always going to be free. And the reason why is because we want to make art accessible.
The art shows are free, yeah. And I think like that's another thing that we didn't touch on too. I mean, we also do markets. We have a fairly substantial sized parking lot right beside the hub. And in there, we actually host markets every Thursday from about May till September.
Yeah. It's called the Hintonburg Night Market. And it's a great way to basically bring community out and for them to kind of just really explore and stuff. And then we do different theme markets. Like we have some art markets and we have some like, vintage markets, stuff like that. It's a way to get more people together and to just build community. And you can see that when you come into the art hub. Like there's a community portrait wall, and it's not just artists. It's everybody that kind of takes part in the space, and that, was part of our street art festival that we have every year, which is called Disrupt. And Disrupt is also about bringing people together to like learn and to take part, like we always have like a community element where people can, create art, and you don't have to be an artist to create art. You can just create art. Even when you come into the art hub, you can doodle on our furniture, and you can, be part of something in different ways.
Yeah. So, community engagement is really good, and that sort of fusion of entrepreneurship and art is something that we really try to focus on. Yeah. So, I mean, like, ultimately, if you don't know the Urban Art Collective, that's kind of in a nutshell. It's an art hub, it's a community space. And, it's also a space that's constantly evolving as well, too. Yeah. So we've not necessarily codified and figured it all out at this point, but that's growing. The fun of it. Yeah.
We have a lot of plans. We have, a lot of things that we want to do that I think that, with the right support, we have the right people behind us. We have the community built. We have a team of people that are ready to kind of go. So I think that as long as we can kind of continue down the path and be supported, there's a lot of things that we can do for the community, but also the art scene in Ottawa. So
circling back to sort of like why we started it, now that people kind of understand like what we do, I know like from my personal perspective, I mean, Lindsay and I have been creative entrepreneurs for years. We've done everything from photography to marketing to website building and things like that. And we were always like marketing businesses, which is fascinating. I love small businesses, and that's something that I've always been passionate about. But it was the ability to sort of switch a little bit, and it happened, in and around the pandemic, and especially after the pandemic, it really spurred us on to sort of think about something that we really enjoyed doing. I mean, I would say I would never consider myself to be an artist, but I do love the art of marketing.
You're an artist.
Well, I do love the art of marketing, and I like the challenge of basically taking especially local art, which I really have a passion for, and then trying to market it. And that's the thing that we've been that's the initial thing that we really started. How can we market and promote local artists to help support them? And then, over doing this is because we used to do pop-up markets just like we do in here, and that's the reason why we
testing the market in Ottawa.
Testing the market, and that's one of the reasons why we did markets here at the UAC, is because we realized that there's a lot of entrepreneurs that need a space to pop up.
We saw a lot of barriers, I think, when it came to that too. Like a lot of the entrepreneurs were females, so it was hard for them to make it after their full-time job to set up a tent and do all this different stuff. So like with our markets, we decided right away that we wanted to have that kind of all-in-one turnkey solution. So there was no barriers to entry. If you wanted to start selling jewelry and maybe it's like your first season doing it, there's no like, well, I have to buy a tent and a table and this and that. I have to have a car to transport it. Like we have one of our really good vendors, when she first started out, she would like Uber here and like pull up in her suitcase and she'd set up her stuff in like 2 seconds. And we're like, wow, remember how like we used to like lug all this stuff around, and it was a huge thing. And like, so.
And I think that harkens back to the, the one word that we use often, and you'll hear it often in the podcast and just talking to us, is accessibility. And I think taking that model for like entrepreneurs and having a tent ready for them and everything else like that, that's part of our model for the Urban Art Collective as well too. We're not the be all and end all for artists, but ultimately we want a space where you can come in, give us your artwork. We can work with you one-on-one to create merchandise.
The collaborative process is amazing, especially like, I think a lot of it spirals too with like the art shows and stuff like that. It's such a fun dynamic when we all work together and we all have ideas and we're all like, hey, how can we elevate your art? Or, a lot of times, like Jay was saying, like, by merchandising, people come in with like a sketchbook and we're like, okay, let's scan it, let's vectorize it, let's, create this into buttons, and we can curate the buttons into packs. And that's something that we're super passionate about. And it's like something that most artists are like, oh gosh, like, thank God, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to sell my work anymore. I don't want to pop up at markets. And they don't want to. And that's where I think that when we originally started, it was there where with the UAC, where we're like, hey, artists don't have the time and the money to be doing this, or the overhead. Like starting our makerspace was huge because we're like, hey, we don't have to print thousands of anything. You don't have to carry inventory of all this stuff. We're like, we print on demand. If sticker packs sell out, we make more. If button packs sell out, we make more. And I think that...
And it takes the burden off the artist to sort of do what artists love doing, is creating. And I mean, some artists do love that marketing aspect of it, but in our experience, it's been something that we don't mind taking over. And it's like Lindsay was saying, it's great, the collaborative aspect of that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, that's a little bit of the history of the Urban Art Collective and sort of what we do, and then ultimately sort of how we ultimately started as well, too. I know another question that often comes up, not only, individual conversations and through email, is, what kind of artists do you support? That's like a big topic, and I honestly...
I don't think it's something we figured out yet.
I don't think it's something that we figured out yet. And I mean, it's stuff that we like. And I mean, I know that sounds a little obtuse, but honestly, I mean, galleries do this all the time.
Yeah. I think it's kind of like for us, it's like the weirder, unusual, kind of like different art that you're not used to kind of seeing. Stuff that you'd see on the streets, stuff that you wouldn't see on the streets. And a lot of the stuff that we even see with artists that we start working with, and maybe they're not a street artist, or maybe they're not a graph artist or a mural artist, but we might like be like, that would be really cool on a wall, you know, like, and then that person can kind of mentor with like another artist. And we see that with Disrupt, you know, like even Steph, which is going to be our first episode, Steph started to work with Alan Andre, you know, after Disrupt and stuff like that, and working with him to help support him, but also learning how to do more on the walls. And Steph had done some before, but I think that's something that a lot of artists are kind of nervous about and want to explore more of, but it's like creating those opportunities to basically
and I think too, like
things.
with us too, it's sort of informed by our backgrounds as well too. Like I know myself, I grew up, my mother was an artist, you know, never published or anything else, but always enjoyed art. And I really sort of gained an interest in love of street art early on. And I think that came from my street photography background when I first started. I really do like being on the streets and photographing people. And of course, that was always a backdrop that I loved to see. I found in Ottawa, when I started doing street photography, there was a lack of street art and things like that too. And I mean, that's something that always sort of stuck with me. And I think that kind of flavors the art that we kind of look at, because I think you have a similar love of street art as well too.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And I think that's why we've always felt really at home in Montreal, because like art is everywhere. Like it doesn't matter where you are, you go outside and there's art, and it's just like really welcomed, and it's like it's just something that we just feel like we're kind of, you know, really like all encompassed when we're there. And I think it's just something very natural for us to like love.
And I think like one of the canned questions we were going to ask is essentially what's our mission. And I really think that to sum it up succinctly, you know, like I really think is we want what Montreal has here, where we have more art on the streets, even more. But we also do really like, we love having other artists come from the other cities and paint murals, but we really want a strong local contingent of art here in the city. And I think the one thing that I've noticed, and like talking to artists and like having shows and meeting people, is the amount of people that are creative in the city, and the amount of stuff that's sort of like unsung. And it's almost like a deluge of like requests and people that we meet. And for us, we're always saying yes to things. And I think that's one of the issues that we have. We're always saying yes to this and yes to that. And we're getting ourselves into probably a little bit more trouble than we need to sometimes with like agreeing to everything.
But also on that level, like we're planning for the future. So we know eventually we will have a team that can help with these things. And so I think not limiting yourself to.
Yeah, but it's hard not to say no, because especially because of the talent. And that's the thing that I really, really like about the city. Because I mean, I hate the term, is Ottawa boring? Ottawa's not boring. It's just, you don't know Ottawa. And I think that's one thing that we really want to promote with this, is to say, okay, like who's out there producing this stuff, and how can we make the city better? And I think we also have to look at city infrastructure. We have a unique city. We have the NCC in the city of Ottawa. And I mean, that's a unique set of infrastructures. And I think there is collaborative approaches that we can, you know, go towards the city and the NCC in doing, and that speaks to Disrupt. We did our Disrupt Festival #2 this year. We did it in collaboration with the NCC, which was nice to see.
It was amazing.
And we really want to see more of that. And I mean, I think ultimately that's our mission. And I mean, if it's, you know, producing a show in the gallery, and then maybe encouraging people to sort of expand their creative horizons and think about doing murals and different things like that. And I mean, I look at, you know, the mural behind us. This is done by Jesus Rivera. And I mean, Jesus is an amazing artist, but he's also done stuff now out on the street as well too.
Yeah. There's a big project right now in Wellington West happening where Jesus's art is going to be on all the electrical, they're electrical boxes for the streetlights. So stay tuned. That's coming very, very soon. That's really, it's going to be a really cool project. It's kind of like, you know, windows of Wellington West, and kind of like what we do in our community, and how, you know, this is like the one thing that we really love about our neighborhood, is that it's a one-stop shop. There's so many, you can get everything you need in our district. And I think that's something that's important, to be able to support local, and to, you know, support local artists, but support local entrepreneurs in your economy. So yeah.
By the way, she's on the BIA, so that's a salacious pitch just for coming to the neighborhood. But besides that, with Jesus, he's also done he's also done collaborations with like Arlington 5 as well too. If you go by Arlington 5,
yeah, that piece is awesome.
And the one thing
the GCTC this year, he did all their programming stuff. So that was awesome.
It's interesting to see too, like the digital realm, because I mean, there's a lot of artists working digitally that don't deal with paint, and I think that's another facet that we'd like to explore more of over the next couple of years.
I think on that point too, like you look at someone like Jesus, and like he's an animator and illustrator. You know, there's not really a lot of space for artists like that to have a gallery show, you know?
Well, I think there's space for a gallery show, but I think...
But the support to have one, right? So Jesus came in with digital files, and we were able to help him, you know, print his stuff and display his stuff and, like, really showcase and highlight how cool his work is with our skill sets. And I think that's where we're talking about collaborative approaches and sharing skill sets and, you know, making sure that people are, like, you know, doing what they do best and like helping elevate each other. So
I do think there is some prejudice in the art world for digital art, and I think that's slowly changing with the advent of like NFTs and everything else like that, because we're not dealing with originality, supposedly a one-off or something that is tangible that we cannot recreate in any way, shape, or form. And I think with us, it goes back to the idea of like marketing. We take people's artwork and we merchandise it, because like you mentioned, if you can't afford an original artwork, you can't afford a print, a button, and I mean,
people are so happy about that.
Yeah, and like there's no harm in supporting an artist that way if you can't afford an original, because that also harkens back to the thing about accessibility. And I think once again, everyone should be able to own art in some way, shape, or form. And it's great to see people come in here and connect with artists, and then slowly start purchasing their artwork, and then get a commission piece, find something from a gallery show, because a lot of the artwork that's in the show as well too is decently priced.
It's very reasonably priced for that reason. And I think that, you know, we want to support artists in as many ways as we can, so artists don't have to wait for that one really expensive piece to sell to that one person that can afford it, or, you know, multiple. But like we look at ways of like, how can we create multiple revenue streams for artists so they can be not the starving artists. They can, you know, have successful careers as artists, but they don't have to wait, like I said, for that one piece to sell. And then more people can support them, and more people can wear their, you know, stickers on their helmets and like a bunch of stuff like that. And then that kind of is a trickle-down effect to people hiring them for custom commissions and stuff like that. So
and I know too, like I know for myself, I've always had a love of Andy Warhol and the idea of the factory and so the commercialization of art, which was I think shunned a lot by artists at the time, but has now kind of been a mainstay in sort of art and pop culture. And I love the fact that, you know, you can get original print, but you can also get a sticker and a button. And I mean, that's fun. And I mean, it's always a collaborative process here, which is great, and accessibility is key. So let's take a look at some of our questions that we sort of glossed over, but I think, you know, we can go back to that. So we talked about perspectives and the artists that we sort of support. I don't think we had to have anything else to add about that.
No, I mean, I could go on for hours.
Yeah, but we're not going to. Community building efforts. I mean, some of the stuff that we've been doing over the last couple of years, building community. I mean, I would say definitely like a community of artists, but also entrepreneurs with our markets as well too, and then sort of fusing those two things together.
And the community that comes out to support them is super important, right? You can't have successful entrepreneurs and successful artists if you don't have the community to basically support. And
exactly, yeah. And so, I mean, it's not only just like Hintonburg, Wellington West area, but I think Ottawa, there's definitely like a grassroots sort of support for local art in Ottawa. And I mean, I've heard that said in the past that like, you know, people don't support artists in Ottawa. I'm like, there definitely is.
There's support, but I think that for a lot of the artists that we represent, they're very underrepresented in the city and under-supported.
Yeah, but I think I think for me, it's just, when I look at that, I see it just as a matter of knowledge of what's out there.
It's also like resources. So, you know, there's a lot of artists that we represent that are like, I don't even bother writing grants anymore because I never get them. And so I spend time marketing my business as a business person. And I find that sad, because then you hear people that are like, oh, I get grants all the time. And it's like, it's easy because they know how to work the system. So I think that that's something that needs to be addressed. And I think for us, we kind of think like, hang on. Like, I think as a collaborative thing, once again, I think like having an organization that can support multiple artists working together in a collaborative thing through grants, instead of taking that pressure off them, is kind of where we're kind of headed, where we want to be like, hey, let's work on this cool project together as a group. and let's get some funding for that. So, we're kind of like splitting that pie, right?
And I mean, I think Disrupt was a good example of that as well, too.
100%, yeah.
And I think, that's something that we want to strive towards. And I'm assuming we are thinking about doing Disrupt again next year.
Definitely, and definitely maybe in a slightly different capacity too. I think that like events like Disrupt, as we know, we had a lot of rain, which was a little stressful. So maybe kind of looking at it, and I know we've kind of spitballed some ideas about how to do things a little bit differently, so we're not so reliant on big festivals and this and that, and support more throughout the year and kind of space it out. So we're not just being like hyper focusing on one thing and putting all our eggs in one basket. I think is something that's super important. So. We definitely have some ideas. We just have to sit down and kind of figure them out. But there's going to be Disrupt. It just might be like multiple disrupts.
And for those that don't know about Disrupt, I know we've dropped that a few times. We will put links in the show notes and everything else like that too, and we'll cut to images and things like that as well. Yeah. But that is, like I said before, a collaboration with the NCC, which is, if you don't know what the NCC is, it's the National Capital Commission here in Ottawa. And we did that in tandem with them, and there's a 400-foot wall, 400 foot or 400 meters?
400 foot.
400-foot wall just at, if you go to the National Gallery downtown, and if you're heading across Alexander Bridge, if you look down, there's a 400-foot wall that kind of goes right along there. And how many artists did we have?
It's underneath the footbridge there, the new footbridge that they're building. There was 8 artists, and then we had another, there was some support artists too that helped and stuff like that as well. And then there was also a 100-foot community wall that we did, where everybody in the community got to come out and paint. And then Mick Michelle was able to take that and kind of like highlight it and then outline it and really kind of turn it into a piece that really brought it together. So that was awesome to see.
And currently that space is still under construction, but it will be launched soon along with the footbridge. And so hopefully by like next summer, everything will be up and running. And
it's starting to look really good.
Yeah, it's quite cool now too.
And Disrupt for year 1, we did our art hub. So basically there was, I believe, 20 artists that worked on that project. It was a big project. And we covered the entire building in art, and we'll show, like Jay said, we'll show some of that. Everybody had to do stuff in black and white. So
we had a general theme that we kind of went with. And it's, it was an interesting collaborative process because it's took some of the artists out of their comfort zone, and then some really worked well with that. But the building is at 1088 Somerset Street West. That is the Urban Art Collective, and you can take a walking tour of the actual space. We're currently in the process of putting up a large QR code that links to our website page that highlights all the artists as well too, which is great to see. Yeah. So I think that it kind of covers off our community building and everything else like that. Now, visions for the future. So, that's a big thing. We have obviously a lot of plans. We are definitely the kind of people that like to think of everything and try to do everything. So we're going to try to keep this as succinct as possible. We definitely have some clear goals over the next couple of years that we want to focus on. Do you want to start?
Okay, short form version.
So... Well, I think first and foremost, let's take a look at just artist acquisition and onboarding. We want to be able to streamline that process and make it a little bit more efficient and bring more artists on. I'm assuming we can both agree with that.
Yeah, we just can't do it on our own anymore. No. We have too many roles at the Urban Art Collective right now, and we've totally kind of, I think, tapped ourselves out completely. But once we build up that team, 100%, we definitely want to onboard more people, but also like the artists that we have right now, we have so much that we could do for them still, and then we're still doing stuff. Like right now, there's a lot of different things kind of in the works with a lot of the different artists, and some that are only like partially onboarded, and that's because we just don't have the time to keep up with stuff. And so
a lot of people do come in here and they assume that we are government funded for some
large corporation that has all this money. Yeah.
I wish it was the case. This has been a labor of love and a self-funded project between myself and Lindsay. Yeah. And we love doing it. Yeah. So there's no regrets whatsoever, but I think going forward, going towards the non-for-profit route, especially because, we also know that's what we should be doing, but it's just obviously time to do it. But a lot of people...
We're already operating in that capacity anyways.
A lot of people come in here and say, oh my God, you're not non-for-profit? That makes no sense.
Yeah. And the only reason we didn't do that was because we already had a corporation that we just were like, oh, let's start building this. And we just kind of started building.
Yeah. Like anything, a lot of people ask us questions about how do you know all this stuff? we're kind of just going along and trying to figure stuff out as we go.
Yeah.
And I mean, we are fairly well, we think about things, but
we have a lot of experience.
Yeah.
But we're also not one to like kind of be like, we can't do anything.
Yeah. And I think the non-for-profit is something that we understand the dynamics of, but it's not something we've ever done.
No.
So, I mean, you know, there'll be bumps in the road, but that's something kind of going forward. And I mean, that brings up the next point is we are obviously going that route.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's super important, access to funding. So we can't grow our team and we can't do all the things that we want to do. Specifically, like what we've done so far is we really consider just to be the foundation. We don't really consider it like more, and there's so much more that we want to build on that we just can't do. Like we're very, like I said, tapped out, and we need funding. So in order to get the grants, you have to become nonprofit, and so we're going down that route because that's how we can help artists in this city and to make art more accessible and to make it, you know, remove the idea of the starving artist. All that stuff has to be done with a team of people. We have built that team of people, and we have a whole bunch of people that are behind us. We have our board of directors formed. We have all that stuff, an advisory committee. It's just, we're just about there. And I think that once we can start doing that, there's a huge change that we can make for the city and in ways of supporting artists. So
yeah. And I mean, the thing about it too, the change for the city is also, I think we really have to sort of look back on it, just bring it back and say there's a big change for individual artists as well too. I mean, individual artists will be changed by the fact of us going ahead with the non-for-profit as well,
I think that's who's going to benefit the most. Yeah. And I think that those are the people that need to be benefiting the most out of this, you know, especially the ones that basically really struggle, you know. And I think that's the thing, that's like there's so much talent out there, but they struggle. And it's like they're doing it because they're passionate. We're doing this because we're passionate. I haven't been paid in 3 years, but I do it because I love what I'm doing. And, you know, we hardly take days off, and we're super dedicated to what we do. And it's because we are trying to build something that's not been built before, and we're trying to support in ways that aren't supported before, and we have put a lot of that on us. And like I said, like Jay said, no regrets, but it's like time to really be like, hey, let's focus in.
And I do, like, at first I didn't really see this, like, so I see like there's a financial, you know, aspect of selling your own art and being successful and everything else like that, but I do also believe that there is a strong mental health component of basically being able to create. And I really think creativity does save people.
It does. It does. And I think that, you know, that's maybe something that we need to maybe ask people for their testimonials about stuff like that and how this space has changed their lives, because we hear it every day. And I think that's something that hits really hard kind of sometimes, because you kind of like are in the hustle and you're like not really realizing the impact that is happening behind the scenes, and even the connections of like people that have met people here and stuff like that. It's really powerful. And it's something that I think that I would love to see more of. And I think that people are, you know, they're thriving that. Like, is that the right word? Thriving? I don't know. Anyways, they're wanting more of that, right?
Yeah.
So,
and I do think that's like beyond like just what we always think of, just the financial aspects of things. I think there's also the thing about just being intrinsically happy and being mentally sound and happy itself. And I think the act of creation for a lot of artists is that process. And then not only the act of creation, but also the act of sort of acceptance. I mean, I can't tell you, seeing the faces of people when they put on shows here, and then people walk in, and I mean, not only family and friends, which is great to see, but like total strangers walking up to artists in the gallery and saying like, you know, I've never seen your work before, it's amazing. And that is something that is life-changing.
It is. It's for the artist and for us, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of hours go into making those shows, and I think that that's something that the artists feel very supported and very represented and very happy when they get to do something like that. And you know, up until recently, we've never charged anybody to have a show in our space, and I think that is a huge barrier to entry for people, right? And so,
I think going forward, we need to make a space for that as well too.
Yeah, I think so too. And like the only time like that we have charges because someone's like, oh, we got a grant, and I'm like, oh, well, we're not going to say no to money because we have commercial rent to pay. But like, it really is something that a lot of artists that have come into our space would have never had a show without the resources that we provided and the guidance and the basically, you know, the help of not having to have the money to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're very resourceful. Like, you know, even Jesus' show, we upcycled maps that were like USSR maps and stuff like that. And people thought it was wild and cool. And that's the thing about our space too. I think we can talk a bit about more of that, is that we upcycle everything. We're always looking at ways that we can,
yeah, I mean, even the roundtable sessions that we're doing for this, Lindsay found these tables that we're actually sitting at right now, and you'll see one of Steph's pieces and the rest of the artists that are working on them. They were tables that were going to be sold or given away for free on Marketplace, and we just looked at them, Lindsay looked at them and said, well, we could do something with them.
They're canvas.
We were able to pick up 14 tables, so we have primed them and they're ready to go, and they're just a little off from the norm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one thing that when we first showed it to artists, because I don't paint myself, but we're like, here you go. And they're like, oh, I've never painted on something that's round.
Yeah.
I've never painted on something that big. And it's like, oh, okay, that's kind of a cool challenge.
Every piece has its own unique, there's history in the tables. And I think that...
And that's the thing that I really like about them. They've been in community centers and probably at one point, places of worship and stuff like that as well too. So there's people that have been sitting around these tables and having a good time. And now instead of throwing them in the landfill, we're fixing them as much as we possibly can and then turning them into canvases, and hopefully they'll go on people's walls.
Yeah.
And maybe that, and I don't like to sound cheesy, but maybe that good energy that was sort of surrounding these tables for all these years will be reflected in the artwork and sort of do that. There's a lot to be
said about round tables too.
Yeah. I mean, it's been throughout history. I mean, round tables have always been a place for communication and sharing of ideas. Yeah. Sometimes obviously ideas that we don't always agree with, but that's also fine as well too. But I mean, I've been to a few weddings and, you always see a nice round table at a wedding. People are celebrating and having a great time. And that's sort of reflected in that too. Yeah. And I think the tables themselves and the idea of the roundtable sessions was sharing people's ideas. And I know I don't want to give too much away because it's the next episode, but Steph's going to talk about, what's on the table and what's the piece all about. And there's an amazing story with that. And the roundtable has once again helped us share that story as well too.
Yeah.
So going forward with future visions for the future, I mean, obviously the non-for-profit, hopefully with that bringing on more and more artists and supporting artists in a way.
And I think also the people that support the artists, right? There's a lot of talent out there of people that aren't doing things that they love to do and that basically are maybe struggling with their mental health or whatever it may be, that have so much potential to shine and to support that community and to create a team and stuff like that. And
there's been a lot of great volunteers here.
Those people are amazing. We couldn't have done what we've done without them, right? So building out opportunities for them to basically shine, I think, is something that we're super passionate about, and that we want to not only support the artists, but we want to build a team of people that are valued and that they basically get to do what they're good at, right? So, and get paid accordingly too.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing too. Yeah. And I don't know. There's just what I've noticed is a lot of good support in this community for arts and community building and things like that too. Yeah. And I mean, going back to even the markets, there's also a lot of support for local entrepreneurs in the city as well too. Yeah. People come to the markets and support the people that, vend here quite often, which is great to see. Yeah. So usually, I mean, most podcasts, we do a call to action at the end. And I think for us, I mean, I would say, obviously there's the simple thing of following the podcasts, coming into the space, checking out the art, even if you can't afford to buy anything, come in and check out the space. I mean, tell us your stories.
If you can support where
of course the support. And I mean also connecting us with artists that as well too. That's the thing that we've loved, is that we've gotten people have come in and said, oh, you should hear about this artist that's doing this, and then we've connected with them as well too, because as much as we've been in this scene for a long time, there's also a lot of people we just don't know.
We've met so many people that we didn't know, and there's so many artists that we were like, oh my gosh, how is it that we have never met you before? And I think you said something else that kind of reminded me, and when you said is there anything else, I think talking about our kids club is important. And I think the importance of art at an early age and making art back to accessible, not that we want to harp on that word, but we also do think that not everybody has enrichment opportunities and not everybody gets to go to art galleries and stuff. So with our kids club, it's free. It's something we've self-funded. because we think that it's important, right? So kids get to come in once a month and get a free button and sticker. They get to get like a kids club card with a secret decoder ring that they get to decode urban art messages we send them. And we send them art-based activities that are, you might just need a pencil and a paper. Like they're not stuff where your parents have to go and buy you elaborate, art supplies to do them. And kids, when they come in here monthly, a lot of kids that come in too, you know that they might not have been able to come into this space because of finances, but they get to come and see a free art show and they get to be part of the kids club, and there's no barrier to entry there, right? And so starting inspiring them early and getting them interested, and there's so many kids that have so much talent in the city, and they've been coming into like some of the workshops that we've been doing with Andy for the current hip hop fusion show that's on, and it's wild, and the parents say like, oh, I like seeing this because this is an opportunity that we haven't seen before in the city to do art in this way. Like we provide iPads and stuff like that. And it's just trying to look at the art scene a bit differently and how we make it accessible to people is really important.
Getting kids hooked on art early.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good thing. So for those that, don't know where to find that information, there'll be links in the notes on your podcast provider of choice, and there'll also be stuff in the description and YouTube as well. And if you want to find that information now, you just have to go to our website, urbanartcollective.ca, and there is a space where you can sign up for the Kids Club card or the Kids Club, and there's you can come into the space as well too. So even if you're not here, you can still sign up for it, because we do a newsletter. The newsletter we're figuring out a schedule for that, let's just say, but
we try to do it monthly. We're pretty good.
Pretty good. And so even if you're not here in the city, you can still sign up for that and get your kids involved in art. And of course, if you are, come by the space and have your kids pick up a button or a sticker for free once a month and things like that as well too. So let's take a look. Upcoming projects or events. Anything else like that?
Well, we have 2 large markets coming up. There's going to be some live art and different things happening at the events, live music.
So that is
So we have the
November Nostalgic Market.
Nostalgic November Market on November 23rd. That's from 3 to 8. It's at ZB, which is just really like 5 minutes from us, in a really cool industrial building. And in the same building, December 7th and 8th, from 2 to 7 both days, we have the Not Your Typical holiday market. And we have an urban Santa, which is super cool. He's been kind of coined as sexy Santa now. Definitely more women lined up last year for that Santa, but we have that, and we have like live art again, and like a bunch of different things happening. So
and that's once again local entrepreneurs. We have for the November? What do we call it?
Nostalgic
November Market. So that is vintage, antique, and retro and nostalgic stuff.
Yeah,
so vendors, and I think we have about how many vendors will be in the space?
About 30.
About 30 vendors.
Yeah. And the holiday market is more.
And the holidays market's more for that. And that is indoors, by the way. So if you're used to our events here, those are outdoors. But at the ZB, we are going inside for those as well, like we did last year.
The food is going to be so good. Like it's just, and the vibe in that place is just, it's amazing. So,
so come out for those.
Yeah.
So once again,
there'll be a new lineup of art shows too coming in the new year as well. So but definitely come check out the art show that's happening right now.
We're supposed to sum stuff up, and of course, thank you guys. So in summation, this is our first episode. We're hoping to basically record each episode going forward with individual artists working on the round tables. So you will see a cross section of artists from Ottawa, local Ottawa artists working on those. So you will also see a little bit of behind the scenes content as well too, which is great to see as you sort of follow along. You can follow us on Instagram, which is urbanartcollective.ca on Instagram, and of course we're on Facebook as well too. Those are our 2 sort of main platforms of choice for the most part, besides our website, and links to those will be in the show notes. So this is the point in the podcast where we tease about the next episode and what's going on. So what's our next episode?
It's going to be with Stephanie Victorine. And Steph is going to talk about their art practice. We met Steph as a volunteer here, and Steph has really surprised us by their talent on many levels, and is still very much intriguing us with all their little quirks and characteristics, which you'll learn more about.
And very amusing stories, by the way, too. Yeah. So
very interesting person.
Yeah. So you will see behind the scenes. We have some footage and content of Steph painting the piece and then sitting down and discussing that with us for our next episode. And the episode after that will be another amazing local artist also talking about one of the pieces from the roundtable sessions. Yeah.
Sounds good.
So stay tuned for that. And if you can, follow us on your podcast provider of choice. And of course, if you want to see us in person while we speak, you can, of course, go over to YouTube. And if you're here already, hello, and I guess goodbye.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Did You Know Unearthing Urban Creatives? This podcast has been made possible by a grant from Awesome Ottawa. Our thanks to them for supporting our exploration of urban creativity. This episode was produced by the team at the Urban Art Collective with music provided by The Bouge. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at urbanartcollective.ca to keep up with our latest projects and events. If you enjoyed the show, consider visiting the Urban Art Collective in person. We're the place where community and art meet, and we'd love to share that experience with you. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep creating and stay connected.